I'm a deep optimist and believer in our education and job market systems and their potential. And yet we know that while it works for many, it doesn't work for everyone.
Education for all, economic mobility for all, a safety net for all. They are Gates Foundation things, keeping the American dream alive and partnering on ideas worth stealing.
TFIC takes you deeper into the stories that are shaping the future of state and local government.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
You're not Buzz Lightyear.
I'm Siri.
And I'm Google.
And I am Alexa.
Alexa seems so smart, I think we'd have a lot to talk about.
Pew, pew.
From governing and government technology, this is The Future in Context. With Paul Taylor, I'm Ashley Silver. Big philanthropy is taking an ever larger role in taking on society's toughest problems. For the Gates Foundation, its big problems of choice are education and economic mobility. Through its partners, the foundation is helping improve lives in communities across the country for the people who live in them. Paul sat down for a feature-length interview with Allan Golston, president of the U.S. program for the Gates Foundation.
So, Alan, not to put too fine a point on it, who are you and what do you do?
Paul, first, just let me say how awesome it is to be invited to be on your podcast. And I'm particularly excited because of your audience and what you're doing to, create community and to create connections around ideas that can, continue to make our country, our great country, and the American dream a reality for as many people as possible. So just a deep thank you to you. So my name's Allan Golston, and, I am the president of the U.S. program for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. My background is really shaped closely by my personal history, and who I am is for all of us is very much shaped by my personal history. So just to add a bit more detail to that, I grew up in Denver, Colorado, in a neighborhood called Park Hill. And, my family was a family that really does represent many aspects of the American dream. We had a lot of love in our family. Both my parents came from very humble beginnings, and they came from big families in the Midwest, and had a number of struggles with having the things that they needed: access to a quality education, sometimes food, sometimes the clothing that they needed. But they worked incredibly hard, and they were raised in families that worked incredibly hard. And they were able to create our family in a way that we were all able to be part of that movement across the economic ladder to a middle-class life in America. My dad was in the military. He got out of the military and put himself through school on the GI Bill. My mom had me as a single mother, and while she had a newborn child, she put herself through nursing school. They made sure that my brothers and I had access to a quality education because they knew that that was part of this idea of the American dream. I was very fortunate in that way, and that I had parents that were hyper-focused on navigating to the middle class. They understood the importance of hard work and education and values like giving back to the community. Without question, though, my mother had the greatest influence on my life. I'm deeply influenced by my parents with values, again, of hard work, a strong education, giving back, and, this sense of community and giving back. And so a large part of my career, whether directly or indirectly, has been very much focused on doing my part to give back. And I consider myself very, very fortunate to be able to work in an organization like the Gates Foundation that has a platform and a belief, a deeply held belief, that everyone should have the opportunity to reach their full potential, and a deep belief in the education and job market systems here in the United States as a critical engine to economic mobility and security.
Your lived experience certainly is compelling and informs your work, obviously. What is your take on the American Dream circa 2024?
I'm a deep optimist and believer in our education and job market systems and their potential. And yet, we know, and we spend a lot of time looking at the data across the country, and we know that while it works for many, it doesn't work for everyone. And where it does work for many, it doesn't always work as well as it should. And there's a particular data point that I'm struck by. And when we think about the American dream, we often think about, I want my kids to do better than I did. And that's this idea that we can work hard, we can educate ourselves, we can provide for our families, and that's going to kind of be amplified because our children are going to do better than we did. Children born in the 1940s, 90% of those children did better than their parents did. Now, if you then fast forward to the percentage of children born in the 1980s, who earn more than their parents did, that number has dropped to 50%. So that is a striking movement. 90% to 50% of children born in those two generations that are doing better, earning more than their parents did. And I think we see that reflected in our country every day. And I know that many of your listeners see that in their communities and in their constituents. And so it says that we have a lot of work to do to make sure that education, our job markets work for everyone, and they work so that they're equitable and they work for everyone, and that your circumstances, whether that's your income status or your gender or your race or ethnicity, doesn't predict or determine the opportunities you have to participate, nor does it determine the outcome.
What is the work that needs to be done to get that number better?
Well, when I think about what we focus on, and I would say education and jobs are critical inputs. They're not the only things that make this concept of the American dream better, but they're critical inputs. We do need to make sure that our public education systems work for everyone, whether that's getting access to high quality early learning, or making sure that students are proficient in literacy and math, that they graduate from high school, that they immediately enroll in some type of post-secondary experience, whether that is a credential experience, a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree, a certificate. Maybe that might mean some work-related, career-connected education, and that they graduate from a post-secondary institution to be able to then access great jobs for them to be able to thrive, and for those that build a family to be able to support their families. But in addition to that, we need our job markets to work, and we need those who, when they have they encounter something unexpected in their lives, we need them to be able to access the array of benefits, whether that's safety net benefits or tax benefits, in a meaningful way. And what we found in our work is that oftentimes it is not that there isn't help. It is just this tremendous bureaucracy and paperwork that prevents people from getting the help that they need when they need it. So, one of the stories that I'll share that I'm just struck by, this woman named Latina Denson, and she was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. She pursued her education. She ended up with a PhD in public policy and in urban affairs, if I am remembering correctly. And she was working and essentially thriving. And then at one moment, she had a stroke, and Latina lost her ability to work, to walk, to talk, to write even. So this was a significant moment in her life that was obviously unexpected and a huge setback. As she began her healing and rehabilitation, one of the most significant challenges she faced was accessing the safety net benefits in Michigan. At the time, the state's application process was something like 40 to 45 pages long. There were hundreds of questions that you had to answer in order to be able to satisfactorily complete and then turn in the application for it to be considered. So tons of red tape, an incredibly burdensome process, and it created barriers for her, but obviously thousands and thousands of others who just needed a helping hand in their life when they needed it the most. We have a partner called Sevilla, and Sevilla worked with the state of Michigan over a period of years and eventually rolled out a new form where you could complete it on average in 20 minutes or less. And it took almost 50% less time of the state employees to process those applications. So here you go from, 42 pages of red tape, hundreds of questions of red tape, to being able to complete it in less than 20 minutes, and for the government employees to be able to process it in roughly half the time. So it made the application process much more simple, and it allowed people who really needed the help access hundreds of thousands of safety net benefits that they were eligible for to help them recover from whatever situation that they were in. And what I'm struck by that story is a quote that another individual citizen said in a separate situation. Her name was Lorianne, and she said, we're in this situation because we're already down. Don't make it more painful or difficult than it already is. Like, we're already down, we're already at the bottom. I think that is a critical aspect of helping to solve this problem because, life is complicated. There are unexpected things in life. One of the critical functions of government is to make sure that when people just need help to get back on their feet and to get back on that ladder of economic mobility, that they can do that. Being able to eliminate the red tape that comes with that and the overwhelming just processes that were set up is one of the ways that we're supporting partners to be able to help governments and help individuals access the things that they are eligible for, whether that's tax credits or tax benefits, but also many of the safety net benefits that, are great parts of the fabric of America to support those who are in need.
At both governing and government technology, there's a strong undercurrent of what's called solutions journalism. And what you just described falls in the category that we like to call ideas worth stealing.
Yes.
Has that Michigan example, have they been able to replicate that in other jurisdictions through your partner?
Sevilla is working to replicate that in as many states as possible. I mean, this takes a lot of effort. I think they worked in Michigan for several years to be able to reach that, but they're committed to it. We're committed to doing our part to make that true. And so that's definitely an idea we're stealing. At the same time, I'm reminded of a fantastic leader that I had a chance to meet through NACO, who is based in Oregon, and I think Multnomah County in Oregon. And this is a commissioner. Her name is Commissioner Lori Stegman. And she took this similar concept and worked with her kind of county to look at what are the types of community safety net benefits and questions that we're getting, and what does it take for our constituencies to get answers or to access those safety net benefits. And when they got that answer, they took the initiative to develop this online portal called the Common Services Application, which has become, in a similar way, this one-stop shop for people applying for benefits from multiple um, government agencies, and those that have questions, I believe, can inquire and get a lot of those questions answered. And they too were able to, through that Common Services app, that online portal, reduce the number of questions that someone needed to answer from uh, something like, I'm not going to remember the exact number, but something like from 100 to 20 questions. I mean, that is a dramatic change. And they were even able to do even more dramatic changes for seniors who are engaging in needing safety net benefits in their constituency. So, that's an idea we're stilling. And that is where, many of the local and county leaders um, and employees and partners can really work at that local level. I was so impressed in talking with her because it really had a dramatic impact in her county.
One of the other partners I wanted to ask you about is Results for America,
Yeah,
and in particular, what they call their economic equity catalog.
yeah.
Can you unpack that a little bit and where you see the opportunities for stealing there?
This is a resource where local leaders can go, state leaders can go to both understand and replicate things that are proven. They know, they're known to work, they're practical. And it's a catalog that our partner Results for America put together. It's called the Economic Mobility Catalog. They can find really thoughtful, evidence based summaries of a number of strategies and very specific programs. I think over 200 specific programs from around the country that have demonstrated positive results. So it's one of those public goods, one of those ideas we're stealing, and you can really be able to go there and say, hey, I'm working on the unhoused or the homeless in my community. And you can go and find strategies and specific programs that can help you with that. Um, Food insecurity, like a number of just challenges that we have in our country. This economic mobility catalog covers. So it's a really important resource. It has gotten, it's well received. It's getting and has gotten a lot of traction, and I couldn't recommend it more as a resource.
In terms of state and local government leaders, both the electeds and the appointeds, what do you think that they're doing well, and where's there room for growth?
There are hundreds of places in our country where things are working. Like leaders and communities have figured out how to do X or how to do Y or how to solve Z problem. Commissioner Lori Stegman, I mentioned her. There's another commissioner in El Paso, Texas, that has figured out how to use and challenge data and to really get underneath data to understand what it tells them about what their constituents are experiencing and to make really data driven decisions. So I'd say one is there are a lot of points of light about what works, and those are getting shared, and they're forming partnerships like the mobility catalog to share those things. Number two is they're using data and evidence to drive decision making. As I mentioned, in El Paso County, Commissioner David Stout was really looking to understand um, internet access, and particularly high speed internet access in El Paso County, Texas. And he got a report, if I understand it correctly, that basically said, we don't have a problem in El Paso County. And in fact, it was in the mid to upper 90s, this data showed had access to high speed internet. And, he, in many ways, you're like, okay, move on to the next problem. But he questioned the assumptions of the data and really said, oh, I need to dig underneath. And he decided to launch his own survey versus accept a report that came from another source. And that survey showed that only half of the residents in El Paso County had any access to the internet. So it wasn't 95%, it was 50%. And that's what we see also, leaders at the local level just doing really, really well, which is kind of looking at their assumptions, looking at data and saying, I really need to understand the data and the evidence in order to make a great decision for my county, my constituents. So, those are two areas that we see people doing well. We see a lot of leaders, just as a final, just bright spot, accessing a lot of the resources that I talked about, like the mobility catalog, and or some of the other public goods that are out there that help, like getyourrefund.org, which helps constituents access kind of tax benefits like the earned income tax credit. So they're bringing those resources to their community and making sure that their community knows about them and are able to really take advantage of them. What I think, all of those kind of bright spot show is also, I think, a potential shadow side. We see opportunities to do more of that, to really ask the question, is what I'm doing, what degree does it have an evidence base around it? So I think that that's an opportunity that we see. There's an opportunity to actively seek out networks. Oftentimes, you see leaders solving a problem or working on a problem that someone else has already solved. They've already maybe hit a couple of roadblocks or speed bumps, and they figured out how to navigate those speed bumps. So, being able to be part of networks, whether they're active, kind of in person networks like NACO, or they're resource like the mobility catalog or some of those other things. So thinking, okay, I'm working on something that feels really hard and is really hard, but I'm guessing someone else has already figured this out. And being able to be part of those networks or access some of these ideas that have been packaged exactly for these types of situations, for these leaders to say, hey, a lot of people have gone through this before you and have figured this out, and we know it works. And here's what it is, and here's what they learned, and here's how to think about it, and here's a potential path for you to be able to solve this faster, more effectively, and with just wider benefits for your constituents.
What practical advice would you have for a state or local official who wants to do that, who wants to engage in a network, perhaps even engage with a foundation to solve some of these intractable problems? And yet, perhaps it's a little daunting to think that, maybe the Gates Foundation's a little above your pay grade. What practical advice would you have for them?
In terms of your question about networks, ask and then join them and participate and contribute and learn. I had a chance to interact at a NACO conference, and it was just fantastic. I mean, you have these leaders uh, who are just overflowing with ideas and happy to help and give me a call. I can walk you through this. So I just saw this incredible network, uh, who were there helping each other. So figure out the network that works for you, join it, actively participate. Thinking about foundations in a way that is like realistic to the role of a foundation, I think would be the first step. And what I mean by that is foundations have a very limited role. And when you think about their resources relative to the private sector or government, it's quite limited. Just to illustrate that, um, the Gates Foundation, across all of the things we do globally, we are a drop in the bucket relative to the size and scope of the resources and investment that is going into these systems, and to both keep them going, keep them moving, solving challenges. So I think that context is important, is that seeing philanthropy and foundations as a catalyst and not as an enduring solution to a problem, I think is really important. Getting to know foundation approaches and funding priorities is, I think, really important. Oftentimes, foundations like the Gates Foundation have very specific strategies and focus areas, and they're not actively looking for unsolicited proposals or ideas. Doing some homework and to get somewhat knowledgeable around what are the foundation priorities that you're trying to work with, I think is a second piece of advice. And then finally, I would say getting to know this role called the program officer, which is where the the role that most foundations have, that actually do the grant making development, the idea development. They often work closely with the grantee, whether that's a government or a nonprofit, and in some cases, a for profit entity. Those relationships are really, really key and important. Trying to just say, hey, I'd love to have coffee and hear how you all are thinking about, education. We're thinking about education and we'd love to learn, and I'd love to have coffee or grab a quick call. Establishing those relationships would be the third piece of advice. And to your point of it being daunting, that big enterprise I don't know how to work or engage with, that suddenly when you have a relationship with an individual or a program officer, makes that much more accessible, far less daunting and or intimidating, and can lead to productive conversations and discussions.
At the beginning of the conversation, you said that you were an always and forever optimist.
Yeah.
So, taking this moment in time, which is about halfway through the third decade of the 21st century,
Yeah.
looking ahead, let's say 5 years, what is your best case scenario and worst case scenario for American community? And what do you think will tilt towards the best case scenario in the medium term?
I appreciate the question. One of the areas I'm spending a lot of time on is the role that generative artificial intelligence can play in our education and economic mobility systems. And I'm really optimistic about it, because, as many of your listeners know, resources in our country are constrained. And there are very few organizations that would say, I have the resources I need to do what I'm being asked, to serve the communities I need to serve, to educate the students that I need to educate, and to get the equitable outcomes we need. And there's just this real sense that the challenges ahead of us are much larger than the resources. And what generative AI offers is not a silver bullet, but a way to help relieve some of those kind of constraints. So, a concrete example is an investment in a partner that we have in our education space called EdLight. And EdLight is working on how to use generative AI to support teachers to grade homework. That's a real opportunity, because teachers spend hours and hours and hours a week grading homework, particularly written homework, so by hand. And oftentimes they have all of these other responsibilities to juggle. And oftentimes that results in a student not getting homework for days, and in some cases weeks, after they did the assignment, or it isn't as uh, insightful enough for the student to be able to see the grading and the comments and understand, okay, now I understand what I might have missed and what I got right, and I know what I need to work on next. That's unfortunate, because getting feedback that's timely from your teachers is a real important part of a learning experience. And I mean, we've all had that experience where we've turned in something and you just were eager to get that feedback. And sometimes that was a positive experience and sometimes that wasn't. But it's not because you have teachers just sitting there waiting. They have tons of things, and grading takes hours. And EdLight is working on how to automate that more so that teachers don't have to spend so much time grading homework. So it's done faster. It's very insightful. It allows the teacher to just engage in a fundamentally different way with the student. And it happens extraordinarily quickly. So that's an example where saving hours and hours of teachers' time on something that generative AI can meaningfully help with is this area where you can help in a resource constrained environment. You know, there's only so many hours in the day, there's so many hours a teacher has. And if you can relieve that so that teachers can spend their time on higher order, just much more productive uh, things that they have to do and responsibilities and obligations, that's a big, big win. So whether that's grading homework or doing even more to automate access to benefits, that's so that you almost have like a agent that is helping guide you through all of the different red tape in this very expeditious way. Those are some of the potential opportunities that generative AI can offer. And the thing that I worry about is that those innovations, and I mean, I've seen some of these demonstrations, and some of this innovation is already out adding value to people every single day. My big worry is that it's not accessible to everyone and that it's inequitable. You know, as many know, generative AI requires a lot of power, compute power, which is expensive because of the electricity. While that will eventually go down, it needs to still be accessed equitably so that if you're in rural communities or other circumstances, that you get the same access to these types of innovation. So we're worried about that, and we need to, as a country, kind of solve that. And then to your question around what do we need to do as a country in that context, accessibility and affordability. We need to make sure that generative AI is tilted to solve some of the big, tough, intractable challenges, like helping with grading that that just wouldn't necessarily be possible or happen. So to make sure it is like really tilted towards some of these just really tough challenges that help support, in our case, and view education and economic mobility. These large language models sometimes are biased. They haven't had access to the data sets that are needed for them to do their very best. As a society, we need to make sure that that happens, that these models work for everyone, that they represent a wide range of experiences, and that data of those experiences is made available to them, and that we hold ourselves accountable to that. So there's a lot that we can do to solve the downsides, but I'm super excited about the upsides and the opportunity that this will afford. And again, in a resource constrained setting, which almost every setting and context that we work in at the foundation, that's true, whether it's government or in some cases markets that are trying to solve some of these challenges, resources is number one, number two, or number three on the list, or this idea that we need more resources to be able to have more impact. And this can really, really help and be part of the solution.
We can be thankful for work that matters. Allan, thank you so much for doing this.
Hey, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, and I really have appreciated the questions and the discussion.
Allan C. Golston, President of the U.S. Program for the Gates Foundation. Our production team includes Theo Douglas, Kate Albrecht, and Zoe Manzanetti. Our executive editor is Noel Nell.
Author Fern Tiger sat down with me for a feature-length interview. We explored the major themes of her new book, Creative Instigation, on connecting with communities before launching projects. It is an important idea for people wanting to get stuff done, including those in state and local government, especially forging relationships to foster economic growth and innovation. Besides, isn't Fern Tiger just the coolest name? That's next time on The Future in Context.
And that will do it for us this time around. For Ashley Silver, I'm Paul Taylor. Thanks for listening. Always forward.